load. Good morning, everybody. Thank you so much for joining us today. My name is Christie Bruner. I'm here with the St. Petersburg Area Chamber of Commerce, and I'll let John introduce himself.
Good morning, everyone. My name is John Learn. I work for Baycare Health System. I'm the Government Relations Manager, and I specialize in our federal advocacy, but I'm also abreast and on top of everything that's happening at the state level as well. Great to be with you.
And his new role, John is our co-chair for our legislative committee. We also have Jessica Caruso from Spectrum, who is our co-chair as well, and you'll be seeing more of her throughout the session as well. So we wanted to take this opportunity to welcome you to the 2024 legislative session and give you a little bit of information about what we're doing on the chamber side and then what's going on in Tallahassee and how our chamber members can be a part of that. So to kick us off, I'm going to show you a little bit of what's going on the chamber side and show you our website and let you navigate that a little bit to be able to get to our chamber advocacy priorities. So hopefully you're familiar with our chamber advocacy website. It's stpete.com/advocacy. And we did just upload our legislative priorities. I'll scroll through and then I'll come back up to those. On our website, you will also be able to find some of our recap videos from legislators from the last session and more ways to get involved. This is our Public Policy Council, all of our committees and task forces with the RSVP links. And then also ways to go ahead and watch online, our Florida channel for our legislative sessions and St. Pete TV to watch our city council meetings. So if you click right here on our legislative priorities, these were just voted and approved this week. Just wanted to go through some of the buckets that we're working in, and these align with not only our chamber priorities and our chamber committees that we work in, but also align with our mayor's priorities and initiatives that he's working in as well. So really collaborative across those two entities. So starting out with education and workforce development, these are kind of some overarching priorities that we have in these topics. And then the only things that we listed on this hard copy are some funding appropriation requests from some of our chamber members. If you feel like your appropriation request is not on here, or if there's anything added throughout the session, please let us know. We will be tracking bills, as John will talk about a little bit later. Those are a little bit more fluid, so those will be updated more on our website and ways to get involved as well. So education and workforce development, a few of the organizations that have some appropriations include USF, YMCA, and DOLI. Attainable employee housing has been a priority of our chamber and continues to be a priority. There is a expansion that is looking, Habitat for Humanity is looking to expand for affordable home ownership in that housing category that we are supporting. Cross Bay Ferry has always been something that we're advocating for and learning more about, and the city has a Cross Bay Ferry dock appropriation request. Sustainability and resiliency is something, obviously, as we know, with Hurricane Idalia, with the no-name storm, with climate change, with hurricane hardening and resiliency efforts being ever important. That is something that we're keeping an eye on, as well as smart cities technology. That's something that you're going to be hearing more about from the chamber, from the city as a whole in 2024. Healthcare. Yep. Did you have a question?
No, sorry.
Oh, no worries, no worries. Feel free to put questions in chat, and we'll definitely have room for questions at the end as well. Moving on to healthcare and wellness. This encompasses proactive health and wellness. So the St. Petersburg Free Clinic has a healthy neighborhood store appropriation, as well as some disaster support resources in there, as well as making sure that there's policies and initiatives that improve healthcare services. And then here's a few of the other budget requests that align with the business community interests throughout St. Petersburg, including the Palladium, cultural resources, Bill Edwards Center for the Art, Woodson Museum, St. Pete Science Center. One of the main priorities I know for the governor for his budget is hardening for Holocaust and Jewish organizations. So that is included in the Holocaust Museum. As well as Tampa Bay Water and Gulf Coast JFCS. So I'll stop sharing that for our priorities. And please let us know, anybody on the call now or that's watching in the future, if you have other things that align with those different budgets and areas that we're focused on that we can continually add to our list of things that we're watching for the session. So with that, I'm going to throw it over to John, and I'll pull up our PowerPoint and he can get us kicked off.
Awesome. Thank you, Christie. And real quick,
Yes.
I'll just introduce myself again. Obviously, now I work with Baker Health System and lead our federal advocacy and the government relations shop there. Previously, I worked on State Representative Ben Diamond's congressional campaign when he was looking at running for CD 13. And prior to that, I worked for State Senator Janet Cruz.
All right. Can you see my screen here, John?
You can see it. Yep.
All right. Fabulous.
So I know Christie just covered the legislative priorities that were finalized. I did just want to provide a quick flag for you all on the legislative fly-in that we're doing, in collaboration with Amplify Clearwater, the Beaches Chamber on 123 and 124 in Tallahassee. We're really excited. Meetings will start coming together in the next week or so, and it should be a really good turnout.
Absolutely. We are partnering with Amplify Clearwater as we did last year, and also bringing in Tampa Bay Beaches Chamber. So really working on bringing a regional cohort to Tallahassee as we all collaborate on some of those meaningful topics that we just talked about in the priorities, transportation and housing and sustainability. So we have close to 50 people that'll be joining us in January. If you haven't gotten on that list yet and are really interested or will already be up there, please let me know and we'll let you know the details.
All right. So just kind of looking ahead, we'll talk about some bills that have moved to this week, but kind of taking a look at the dynamics during the 2024 session. And first, the biggest piece of this is Governor DeSantis running for president, and that's significant for a couple of reasons. I mean, one, you would say in past years, the governor, we would have had a couple special sessions by now. We would have had a laundry list of things that he wanted to get passed. This year, it's been relatively laid back in what he wanted and what he requested. If you watch his State of the State earlier this week on Tuesday, you would have heard him kind of say, we've done so many great things. And he was really speaking to that national audience. And he gave the message to legislators to stay the course. And we really heard that reflected from, Speaker to be in 27-28, Rep. Sam Garrison from Fleming Island, Florida. He said this will be more of a member-driven session. And the governor's comments really reflect that. He's focused on his presidential race and pointing to his record of what's already been accomplished. So, it says running for president for now. Obviously, the Iowa caucus is next week on Monday night. We'll see how he does in that. And, obviously, polling has shown that former President Trump is some 30 points ahead. The caucus is a little bit of a unique event. The governor has spent a lot of money on grassroots, so it'll be interesting to keep eyes on that. But, there's Super Tuesday during session, and then right after session is the Florida primary. So it'll be interesting to see if the governor is able to stay in the presidential race throughout session, kind of what that looks like. As the legislature passes laws and debates policy, that'll affect us all. So that message of stay the course. Another point he talked about that was significant in his State of the State was that reduced regulation for Jewish transfer students, and that's something that's already kicked in. The State Board of Governors released some information that essentially said, they're waiving some fees and some requirements due to the anti-Semitism that they've seen nationally as a result of, what's happening in the Middle East. So Florida is looking to kind of become a haven for those students based on what's happening in college campuses in other states per the governor. And then kind of moving to the two presiding officers. They had some really big priorities last year, and they got a lot of it done. Looking to this year, President Passidomo spoke about a few things. The biggest being live healthy, right? And we've heard a lot about it. Enormous bill. It's a couple of bills really, but over 100 pages type of thing. And it really focuses on expanding our workforce in healthcare and making sure that there's more primary care available to people. So there's a lot of funding going into it, trying to create 700 new graduate medical education slots so that we can educate and train new doctors in the state. They know that more people are moving to the state of Florida, so there's a greater need for physicians in this state as a result. So that makes a lot of sense. Obviously, for Baycare, we've been tracking this very closely. There are some provisions we have concerns about. We can talk about that in a little bit. But last year we had Live Local that focused on affordable housing. This year we have Live Healthy that focuses on healthcare. And we've got Learn Local, a school deregulation bill as well. And that's just to kind of make it easier for teachers to stay certified, lower costs, and that sort of thing for local school districts. And then she had a new plan for land conservation and acquisition, and that's essentially to put some of that gaming compact revenue right to use. I think it was a $2.5 billion agreement over the first 5 years of that deal in 2021. And they're going to commit those funds to, acquire new conservation lands. And we saw during her first year of her presidency, President Pasadomo really expand the Florida Wildlife Corridor, which was significant. And now this is something that would be, in perpetuity, assuming they sign the state budget into law every year, that they would expand acquisitions with those funds from the gaming compact. Another point just to highlight, again, from that healthcare perspective, the president came right out and said Medicaid expansion is not going to happen, that it's not the cure-all, and then pivoted back to it doesn't matter if more people have coverage if there are not enough providers. So that's kind of the lens she's looking through the issue of, and we can debate whether or not that's accurate from a lot of perspectives, but that's just how she perceives the issue. In terms of Speaker Renner, as we've seen the president focus on healthcare, obviously the House is going to have their response to that. So they've talked about some healthcare transparency provisions they want would require providers to have some duplicative the federal rules, but publicly listed prices, shoppable services, that sort of thing on their website. He's talked a lot about mental health too, and you'll see this reflected in some of the online materials that minors can see and legislation we'll talk about in a bit, but also access to social media for those under 16, which they're trying to kind of curb. And that's that next point there. And then there's some criminal justice reforms too that I think will be of interest, especially to municipalities that might get rid of citizen review boards locally. So it's just kind of the dynamics going into session. One other thing, Speaker Bruner was kind of asked about this during a press conference. He's not looking to expand the limitations on abortion in the state of Florida, which is significant. Obviously, it's a campaign year, but he's kind of trying to stay away from that issue from that previous 15 weeks that they passed in Florida last year.
Oh, Jessica just popped on. Hi, Jessica. Welcome.
Oh, yes, my meeting just ended, so I'm super happy it wasn't a full hour.
Thank
Sorry
you
for
for
being
popping on. Did you want to introduce yourself? We do have some people on the line today, and we're recording this for feature.
Yeah, of course. Hi, everyone. My name is Jessica Caruso. I work at Spectrum Charter Communications as their government affairs lobbyist. I'm super excited to be co-chairing this legislative committee with John and working with Christie in the chamber. I'll let John take it away from here. Sorry for being late today.
No problem at all. All right, we're ready for the next slide.
Yes, ma'am. All right. So the favorite time of year for everybody in the state is right before Christmas, when the governor gets to release his proposed budget. And before you go away for the holidays, you get to pour through 400 pages of budget.
That's everybody's favorite.
Yeah, everybody's favorite task. He's had different titles for these over the years. This one's focused on Florida's future. Notably, again, he's kind of cutting to that, the governor that is cutting to that national crowd. He's touting his previous record and then pointing back to, so this year's budget was 117 proposed billion. Looking at getting lower than that 114 billion last year, 16 billion in reserves. Again, an emphasis on tax relief. So there's some language in there that'll be a 1-year exemption for residential property insurance. There's another for a permanent exemption insurance premium on flood insurance policies. We're going to keep some of those sales tax holidays, and the one on the slide here, the Freedom Summer Sales Tax holiday. They've obviously got, the school tax holiday. They've got the hurricane preparedness. So they're looking at keeping those, as well as the diaper tax cut, keeping that going forward too. So that's, good to see, as long as the healthy reserves. And I think we've got another budget slide here as well. So continuing this, looking at retention of state workers, there's that 3% pension increase for retired state of Florida employees, and then a 1% increase to that FRS employer contribution, which they're kind of pointing to as a tool to retain current staff. It's been tough. There's been a lot of positions they haven't been able to fill over the years, and they're looking at cutting some of those and then increasing retention techniques to keep people working for the state, just because private industry is difficult to compete with from a salary position for the state. There is funding to increase teacher pay, which we've heard is really popular priority of the governors over the last few years. correctional officer salaries, and then again, law enforcement officer bonuses to recruit them into the state. A boost of SEFP, and that's education funding for per student costs of $175 this year. And then, as Christie pointed out, kind of with local relevance too, with the Holocaust Museum, there is funding allocated specifically for hardening of Jewish schools, community centers, and house of worship. And that's directly correlated to, again, the political issue in the Middle East, and then kind of the response in the United States while the governor's in that Republican presidential primary. He wants to be seen as that ally to Israel and the Jewish people. So now that we've talked about the budget, and that process works, the governor releases his proposed budget, and it's just sort of a reference tool for the legislature to work with. Again, at the end of the day, the legislature, creates the budget, and then the governor has line item veto powers at the end of the session when it's sent to him, and he always, trims the fat on the budget, but he sends out what he would like to see them fund, and then they spend the next 60 days really forming that state budget and hashing it out. But now moving on to some bills that we saw move this week. We talked about Live Healthy. So in the Senate, that's SB 7016 and 7018. Both of those bills in the Senate have passed committee. They've moved really quickly, and we talked about it. It's President Pasadomo's priority. It's her number one issue. They're ready for the floor in the Senate. The House bill is actually the first one moved through its first committee this morning, but the House is really kind of cutting back and trying to slow roll this. And that's a typical technique you'd see when they're trying to negotiate on what they'd like to see in the package. So, they want some healthcare transparency measures incorporated into the package. So they've talked about that. But talking about Live Healthy, one of the things from a Baker perspective that's really important is the expansion of the Slots for Docs program. That's, 70 million that they're trying to add to that program that would create 700 new spots for graduate medical education in the state. And that's new doctors that have that residency requirement to train at a facility. They're going to help us pay for it so that we can increase the slots we have and get new doctors into the state so that we can obviously get them trained all the way qualified and able to practice themselves. That goes back to that issue of her increasing, the number of physicians in the state of Florida. So that's really significant. There is some aspects of the bill that we have concern over regarding, emergency room diversion, and it puts some onus back on the hospitals in terms of care coordination and kind of the handoffs. And from our perspective, it's an issue with EMTALA where if somebody comes in, we have to treat them. We can't try and divert them at times. So that's a little difficult. And then the House has come in as well and said they're going to offer less money. So we'll see how that kind of hashes out. They come in at half of the 70 million just mentioned. So that'll be something that'll be interesting to see how it plays out. In terms of some of the culture bills and the House Speaker Renner pushes this back to mental health. And I think a lot of people would tend to agree, people that have children, curbing the social media use for minors. That there's also another bill for online access to materials harmful for minors, and they brought them up one after the other yesterday in committee. They both rely on age verification and would essentially, if you're under 16, you can't have access to social media in the state of Florida. You can't have access to those harmful materials. And what the speaker referenced was, of course, hardcore pornography, some of those things. And then for the social media bill, it would require termination of those accounts. So both of those have moved. One committee stop in the House. They haven't moved yet in the Senate. They were just officially filed and hit the website this week. So we'll see it move. I would expect both of these to pass. You did see bipartisan support in that committee yesterday in the House, which was, I think, expected, but was interesting to see that it wasn't as much conversation around it from the Dem perspective on freedom of speech potentially. The other bill we discussed, Senate Bill 7000, and that's the school dereg package. That passed off the Senate floor unanimously yesterday, which was great to see. And then it was heard in its first House committee. The proposals do differ a little bit, but it's really things like, there's a 5-year certification teachers have to take to be certified to teach in the state of Florida for certain teachers that meet metrics, extending that or shortening that, so that they can do it every 10 years instead of every 5 years, some of those sort of things. So I think they're looking at it as a way to cut costs and, again, retain teachers in a vitally needed field. All right. Again, we see another issue taking on minors, and this one really has been something that came, at the request of, I think, of the business community and increasing that workforce, and that would, reduce the curfew and allow minors to work more hours in the state of Florida. It's been moving in the House. It's only got one committee stop left. They did file an amendment, and this is sponsored by Rep. Cheney here from us locally, so that, you know, if there's school the next day, a minor can't work past 11 p.m. or before 6 a.m. So I think that makes a lot of sense, but we'll see. It's obviously supported by the Restaurant and Lodging Association and some of those industry associations. Was just introduced in the Senate, but again, this is one I would expect to pass. It has been kind of controversial though, because there are concerns about educating that workforce for the future if they're busy working now, and what that means and who would have those opportunities. So I'm going to be something to monitor if it changes in the future, and we'll keep our tabs on it from a chamber perspective as well. Complaints against law enforcement and correctional officers. This is passed one of 3 committee stops in the House, and this is HB 601. It was just filed in the Senate. I think the biggest piece here, it would preempt localities on some of the actions that can be taken against law enforcement officers, but it would really eliminate CRBs. So I know there's one in Tampa, I believe there's one in St. Pete as well, so that, you know, citizens have an insight into what's happening with their local law enforcement, and they have that kind of that venue to discuss and review things. This would eliminate those. So I think it's something we'll keep our eyes on. A big bill of interest to the chamber, the Pinellas Suncoast Transit Authority, and that's HB 1487. Again, this is filed by Rep. Cheney. We've had a lot of discussion about it at the chamber level. It was obviously a big discussion point at the Pinellas legislative delegation. Just filed this week, haven't seen committee references yet, but again, that's one we'll keep tabs on. As we know, the chamber has strong feelings about that bill. There was some discussion, Senator Ingoglia from Hernando County filed legislation, and it got a lot of media coverage on basic elimination of vote by mail ballots, and that would have been, you know, only extreme circumstances, you know, military veteran overseas, physically disabled, that you could utilize them vote by mail ballot. But we saw this week the speaker and the president say no, they weren't interested in this. So I think it's notable to say that that's probably not going to pass this year. And I know a lot of people in our community rely on vote by mail voting. I know I do, just because you could be traveling for work. There are a lot of reasons it makes sense that you can't be available for election day, especially in your precinct. So that doesn't have a chance, I would say, to pass. There is another interesting local bill filed by State Senator Ed Hooper out of Clearwater that would limit, you know, how ticketing venues can contract with those manufacturers. It's something that we've seen a lot federally too on that Ticketmaster issue, but venues that accept state dollars would not be able to contract with a single ticket sales entity and then jack those prices up. So it's kind of a free market move by them. There are a couple of bills that look more environmentally focused. You've got regulation of auxiliary materials. And I also had to look up what was defined to be an auxiliary container, but essentially it's those single use, you know, it could be paper, plastic, cardboard, aluminum, what have you, those reusable restaurant or single use, you know, food travel containers for beverages, merchandise, what have you. And this bill would preempt that at the local level. So that's not singling out plastic, but that's saying any of these auxiliary materials, they cannot be, you know, prohibited at the county or municipal level. So that's something significant, obviously, for us, the coastal community. And then on the flip side of that, you've seen State Senator Ana Maria Rodriguez, and she represents Homestead, and she's got the Florida Keys. So she's a Republican, but she's got a more coastal district. She's got a bill that would allow a pilot program, for coastal communities specifically to prohibit single-use plastic products and some of that stuff. So on one hand, you see you know, an effort to limit what can be done, and then on the other hand, you see sort of a concession made. Obviously, there's an issue that's been going for the past, you know, 5+ years, where local governments have said, hey, we want to cut out plastic bags, cups, straws, what have you. And you do see a little bit of movement back that direction from the legislature, which I think is interesting. And then just one other note I want to bring up on a local bill of interest. Rep. Cross has filed HB 1299, and I didn't put it on the slide there, but that would allow counties and municipalities, and we've heard her talk about it before to the chamber, to offer that ad valorem tax exemption for those that would rent their accessory dwelling units at an affordable rate. So I know that's something, obviously affordable housing is a priority of the chamber and for our business community, so that people can live and work in the community. So that's a great bill, and that's sponsored in the Senate by Senator Calatayud, and she's, you know, carried the Live Local Act last year. So I would say that has a good chance of passing. It's really promising. to see her on board. And then I think now we just want to open it up to see what your priority bills are, what things are that we can track for you and keep tabs on and ask people about while we're in Tallahassee and having conversations, so that we can be, best use to everyone at the chamber. And happy as well if anyone has questions on what's happening federally to talk a little bit about that too.
Awesome. Thank you, John. Before I flip it to stop share, I just wanted to highlight our upcoming meetings. So we're planning to do this as kind of our preview after, our recap after the first week of session. We'll do a mid-session Zoom on February 9th, and then also a recap of the entire session on March 8th. Which doesn't seem that far away because it's a super fast 60 days. But put those on your calendar. All the links are on our website under events. And then we're also going to be going back to our monthly in-person legislative meetings as well. So whether you're a government affairs official, whether you're interested in learning more, whether you'd like to get more involved with the chamber, either the Zooms or the in-person meetings are all up on our website right now. And then my email for more information. I'll pop it back over to stop share and see if anybody on the line has any questions or anything that we can answer for you here today. And anything else that you wanted to add, Jessica, from your perspective?
No, I think John did a great job covering the first week. So thank you so much, John, and we're happy to answer any further questions.
And one thing I would say, everybody, I do use lobby tools for Baycare. So we've got a ton of healthcare bills specifically that we track that will affect, our hospitals, our primary care clinics, St. Anthony specifically, that we monitor throughout session. But if you've got a bill number that you just want me to, keep my eye on, please don't hesitate to reach out. I'll add it to a specific chamber tracker, and we can keep you updated if we see it moving or, we see an amendment that you might want to take a look at. Happy to be resourceful there for you all as well.
Thank you. Super helpful. Well, if I don't see anybody looking for, oh, hi, Karen. Any questions or anything that we can do for you?
I wanted to say, I thought that was excellent, John. Thank you for that overview. I thought it was very thorough. You have already the EOS, the Environmental and Oceanographic Sciences Research and Training Facility that we received funding for last year and are looking for additional funding, I think around 30 million this year. There were a couple other things. One, and Chancellor Hardigree is very involved with the board, and I'm sure we'll share this if she hasn't already on your trip. But we are looking at a USF-wide allocation for veteran services to increase our veteran or to support our veteran populations. In our last survey of veteran and military connected students, 1 in 3 of our students here on the USF St. Petersburg campus is military connected,
Wow.
which is a lot bigger than we had been tracking before. We want to improve the actual physical location of the Veterans Center here on campus and have plans to do that. We have a mock-up for that. And so that's part of a larger ask around veteran services for USF. There's also an ask for USF Tampa. So there's that. And then last year, USF St. Petersburg, USF St. Petersburg campus is host to the Human Trafficking in Persons Lab, the TIP Lab, we call it. And last year we received the authorization to be the state repository for information collected from different agencies, different law enforcement bodies around the state. We are the repository as authorized in legislation last year to collect that data. There was no central repository for that type of data. So last year we received the authorization, but not funding to support that authorization. So I am not 100% sure what our ask is this year, but I do know that we're looking both federally and at the state level to get support for that.
Wonderful. That's great to keep on our radar. I'll definitely check base with Lauren as well and see how we can help collaborate on the future, and we can keep an eye on that. Thank you, Karen.
And I've got to jump to another call, but I really appreciate this update. Thank you.
Absolutely. Thank you for being here. Maddie, I see your hand up virtually.
Hi, yes. I just had two bills to flag for priority. They're actually the ones that I sent to you. So we have right now SB 1762, Resilient Communities. It's sponsored by Senator Rousseau, and essentially it seeks to establish a grant program for cities and municipalities throughout the state of Florida to receive funding to become certified as trauma-informed communities. So increasing resources, care coordination, things of that nature. And it actually started with the roundtable, came out of, Mayor Welch's roundtable. So would really like to track that.
Oh, did we lose you? You had one more. Maddie, where are you? I know you had emailed me. If you can hear me, I know you had emailed me, so I'll make sure that, and I have this printed out with our asks for appropriations and bill watches. So we'll make sure we get that on if I can't hear back from you, Maddie.
Yeah.
Oh,
Can you hear
hello.
me?
You're back. Yay. Go ahead.
Sorry. Yes. So the other one is SB 1760, also sponsored by Rousseau in the Senate and Hushofsky in the House. And that is conversion of court fines to community service, allowing individuals who have graduated rehabilitation programs and demonstrated that they've been rehabilitated and they want to enroll into continuing education to become credentialed. It's basically a human services workforce expansion project to allow them to convert their court fines into community service hours to be done within a human services environment, allowing them to get on-the-job experience in addition to those experience hours that they need for their credential. So it's education, it's workforce expansion, a little bit of CJ in there. But yeah, definitely want to track that as well. And thank you to John and Jessica for chairing and co-chairing this year.
Wonderful. No, those are great ones. And I love the whole kind of ecosystem of the workforce development and the mental health and the, criminal justice reform. So I love that. So thank you for bringing those to our attention, Maddie. And unless anyone else wants to pop on, I think we'll call it there. And thank you again to our co-chairs. As a reminder, we have those Zoom meetings and in-person meetings coming up, and I'm sure we'll have a great recap after our visit in Tallahassee. So thank you all for your time and have a great weekend.
Thank you.
Thanks, everybody.